What happens when a woman walks into a crowded courtroom, points at the judge, and promises he will be finished by sunset? Drop a comment telling us what you think should happen before this story ends, because the punishment waiting for her was so unforgettable that people in that room would talk about it for years. At 8:12 on a wet Monday morning in Providence, Rhode Island, one threat turned a routine court session into the kind of case millions would replay, debate, and never fully get out of their heads. The woman at the center of it was Cassandra Mercer, 41 years old, wearing a cream Max Mara coat over a black silk blouse, Christian Louboutin pumps clicking hard against the marble floor, a Cartier watch catching the fluorescent courtroom light every time she raised her hand. She did not walk like someone summoned to answer for a mistake. She walked like someone arriving to collect an apology. Hit that subscribe button if you believe the worst kind of power is the kind that thinks it can never be questioned, because this story is exactly about that. Outside, her black 2024 Range Rover Autobiography was still idling at the curb, illegally parked in a lane marked for court transport and ADA access. Inside, every bench in Municipal Courtroom 3 was full. A nursing student named Tiana Brooks clutched a speeding ticket in both hands. A retired welder named Walter Briggs sat with a cane across his knees. A single mother named Marisol Vega kept checking the time because she had to be at Rhode Island Hospital by 10:30. None of them knew that the next 2 hours would upend more than one life. At the bench sat Judge Antonio Bellini, 72 years old, silver-haired, glasses low on his nose, robe pressed and neat, his voice known across the city for being soft enough to make people lean in and strong enough to make them stop lying when they did. He had spent 34 years on the bench. He had seen drunks, thieves, scared teenagers, shattered families, and polished men who thought expensive shoes could hide dirty hands. But when Cassandra Mercer stormed in without waiting for the clerk to call her case, even Judge Bellini's longtime bailiff, Marcus Shaw, straightened up a little. "Your Honor," Clerk Elena Ruiz said, already uneasy, "that matter hasn't been called." "I don't care what hasn't been called," Cassandra snapped. "You'll care when my husband hears how I've been treated." Like this video, if you believe the first warning sign is always how someone treats people they think don't matter. Because Elena Ruiz mattered. Marcus Shaw mattered. The trembling people on those benches mattered. And before the morning was over, the whole city would be reminded of that. Case number MC 251187 looked simple on paper. Obstruction of an ADA loading zone. Failure to comply with traffic direction. Disorderly conduct toward an officer. Most people expected a fine, maybe a lecture, maybe a dramatic scene, and then nothing. That was exactly what Cassandra expected too. She had spent the last 12 years becoming the kind of woman who could make restaurant managers abandon full dining rooms to greet her first. She chaired benefit luncheons at the Harborview Club. She posted filtered charity photos with captions about service while assistants carried her bags. Her husband, Captain Owen Mercer of the Providence Harbor Division, wore a decorated uniform and a reputation for getting things done. In certain neighborhoods, his name opened doors. In other rooms, it closed mouths. Share this with someone who needs to see what happens when borrowed power finally expires, because Cassandra Mercer had been living on borrowed power for a very long time. She had not always been that way. 20 years earlier, she was a pharmacy tech from Warwick with drugstore lipstick and student debt, the daughter of a corrections officer and a school cafeteria worker. People once described her as funny, sharp, hungry, alive. Then she married into prestige, and somewhere between gala invitations and police union fundraisers, hunger turned into entitlement. She stopped wanting security. She wanted deference. She wanted rooms to bend. That Monday started at 7:41 a.m. on Dorrance Street, 3 blocks from the courthouse. Rain had made the crosswalk paint shine like glass. Traffic Officer Theo Banks was guiding vehicles around a maintenance truck when Cassandra's Range Rover cut across the temporary cones and slid into an ADA loading lane marked for paratransit vans. Theo Banks approached the driver's window and told her she had to move. Witnesses later agreed on one thing. She did not even look at him at first. She was busy on her phone, speaking loudly enough for pedestrians to hear. "Tell Owen they've got some street kid in a rain jacket talking to me like I'm a criminal." Theo Banks kept his tone professional. "Ma'am, I need you to move now. This lane is reserved." Cassandra lowered the window halfway. "Do you know who my husband is?" The O answered the way veteran officers learn to answer when they know a camera might be watching. "Today, ma'am, I need to know whether you're following a lawful order." The people around them noticed something else sitting at the curb behind Cassandra's SUV. A white wheelchair transport van with a little girl inside, dark curls pressed to the glass, her leg brace visible under a pink blanket. The driver of that van, Denise Carter, testified later that she sounded her horn twice because 8-year-old Emily Sutton had a 9 o'clock neurology appointment after 3 recent seizures. Cassandra did not move. Instead, she put the Range Rover into reverse, clipped an orange cone, and backed toward a bike lane where a 22-year-old food courier named Mateo Rivas was passing on an electric scooter with a thermal delivery bag strapped to his back. He swerved. The scooter hit the slick curb. Mateo went down hard, shoulder first, then head, the crack audible over the rain. Gasps rose from the sidewalk. A coffee cup rolled into the gutter. Emily Sutton began crying in the van. For one terrible second, the whole street froze. Theo Banks ran toward Mateo. Denise Carter jumped from the van. A barista from the corner cafe, Leela Green, dropped the tray she was carrying and called 911. Surveillance video later showed Cassandra looking into her rearview mirror. She saw Mateo on the ground. She saw Theo kneeling beside him. She saw Denise waving desperately for space to load Emily's medical chair. And then, according to the timestamp, she rolled her window up and said 5 words that would follow her into court. "This is not my problem." By 8:03 a.m., 2 patrol officers had arrived. Mateo was bleeding from the forehead. Emily's van was finally able to unload, and Theodore Banks had issued Cassandra a citation. By 8:07, she was on the phone with her husband. By 8:12, she was in Judge Bellini's courtroom, convinced the matter would disappear before lunchtime. The first thing Judge Bellini noticed was not her tone, it was her timing. "Ms. Mercer," he said evenly, "how did you know your case would be heard in this room before the clerk called it?" Cassandra gave a thin smile. "I know enough people." That line moved through the room like a chill. Elena Ruiz stopped typing for half a beat. Tiana Brooks lowered her eyes. Walter Briggs shifted in his seat. Everybody knew what she meant, and everybody knew she wanted them to know it. Judge Bellini folded his hands. "Volume is not evidence," he said. "Connections are not innocence, and this bench is not rented by the hour." That was the first quote people would repeat online. By the end of the week, it would be printed on coffee mugs and stitched into comments below news clips. But inside the courtroom, it did not humble Cassandra. It irritated her. She leaned forward, one manicured finger pointed at the judge. "You need to dismiss this nonsense now. My husband is Captain Owen Mercer. That officer on the street was disrespectful, incompetent, and clearly trying to provoke me. If this proceeds, I can promise you the city is going to hear about it." A few people inhaled sharply. Marcus Shaw took one step toward the rail. Elena Ruiz stared at the judge. Threats in court came in many forms. Most were muttered by frightened people. This one arrived polished, public, and deliberate. Judge Bellini did not raise his voice. "Are you threatening this court, Ms. Mercer?" "I'm explaining consequences." "No," he said, and the room went so quiet the rain against the tall windows could be heard again. "You are revealing character." If you've ever seen someone mistake intimidation for intelligence, drop a comment telling us the exact moment you knew Cassandra was about to destroy her own life. Because right there, with 40 strangers watching, she had a choice. Apologize, sit down, let a lawyer speak, or keep digging. She chose the shovel. "You think that robe protects you?" she asked. "It doesn't. Robes come off. People in my husband's world remember who embarrasses their family." This time the silence was different. It was not surprise, it was recognition. Everyone in the room knew they had crossed from rude behavior into something much darker. Elena Ruiz's fingers trembled over the keyboard. Tiana Brooks whispered, "Oh my God." Walter Briggs muttered, "That woman is out of her mind." Judge Bellini looked at Marcus Shaw. "Bailiff, secure the courtroom doors." The click of the locks echoed harder than a gavel. Cassandra actually laughed when she heard it, but the laugh was brittle now. "You're making a scene," she said. Judge Bellini answered with another line that would be quoted for months. "No, Ms. Mercer, you made the scene. I'm making the record." Elena Ruiz began typing again, faster this time, every word preserved. The municipal seal above the bench seemed to loom larger. Outside, somewhere in the hallway, footsteps slowed as word spread that something serious was happening in Courtroom. 3. Inside, Cassandra finally glanced around and realized no one looked impressed. They looked horrified. Her jaw tightened. Then the side door opened, and Officer Theo Banks stepped in, rain still darkening the shoulders of his uniform. He carried a folder, a body camera doc sheet, and the expression of a man who had already spent his whole morning being told to doubt what he saw with his own eyes. Behind him came a paramedic supervisor with a hospital wristband packet, and in Theo's hand was a printed incident addendum that had not yet been entered when Cassandra stormed into court. Judge Bellini looked down at the page. His face did not change, but Elena Ruiz saw his eyes pause on one line longer than the others. "Ms. Mercer," he said slowly, "the record has now been updated." "With what?" she snapped. "With the fact that a cyclist was taken to Rhode Island Hospital after your vehicle struck the cone line and forced him into a crash." The room erupted in whispers. Cassandra turned pale, then angry, then pale again. "That's absurd. I didn't hit anyone." Theo Banks stepped closer to the witness stand. "Ma'am, you were informed at the scene that the collision was under review." "I was informed by a traffic cop who wanted attention." "Ma'am," he said, "the victim has a fractured clavicle, a concussion, and significant lacerations to the left side of his face." Now even the people in the back bench leaned forward. Marisol Vega covered her mouth. Tiana Brooks looked ready to cry for a stranger she had never met. Walter Briggs gripped his cane harder. Cassandra's eyes flicked for the first time toward the double doors, calculating distance, options, escape. But then Judge Bellini asked the question that changed everything. "Officer Banks," he said, "is there video?" Theo nodded once. "Body cam, street surveillance, and storefront footage from Green's Cafe." And just like that, a routine traffic hearing turned into a public reckoning with a camera waiting behind every lie. What nobody in that courtroom knew yet was that the footage showed far more than a reckless reversal. It showed what Cassandra said when she thought the injured man could not hear her. And even worse, it showed who she called next. The courtroom recessed for 11 minutes while Elena Ruiz coordinated with the city attorney's office, and court technology brought the first clip onto the monitor mounted to the right of the bench. 11 minutes can feel very long when you still believe your last name protects you. For Cassandra Mercer, those 11 minutes felt endless and not nearly long enough. She spent them whispering furiously into her phone. She asked for Owen. She asked for Lieutenant Halpern. She asked if anyone had control over that ridiculous footage. Marcus Shaw heard every word. So did 3 people in the front row. When court resumed at 8:31, the monitor flickered, the rain-muted street appeared, and the timestamp rolled back to 7:41:18 a.m. Grainy from the weather but unmistakable in shape and motion, the black Range Rover cut across the cones. Theo Banks approached. The transport van waited. Mateo Rivas appeared at frame left, helmet on, delivery bag bright red. The scooter tipped. He flew. His head snapped against the curb. The room flinched as one body. Even Cassandra, who had insisted there was no victim, stopped breathing for a moment. Then the audio from Theo's body cam kicked in, clearer and more brutal than anyone expected. "Stay still," Theo was saying to Mateo. "EMS is coming." Through the rain hiss came Cassandra's voice from inside the SUV. He came out of nowhere. Theo moved toward her vehicle. "Ma'am, I need your license and registration. There's been an injury collision." And there it was, sharp, impatient, unforgettable. "This is not my problem." The courtroom did not whisper this time. It gasped. Marisol Vega actually stood halfway up before sitting back down. Tiana Brooks shook her head in disbelief. Walter Briggs closed his eyes like a man hearing something indecent in church. Cassandra looked at the screen as if it had betrayed her personally. "That's edited," she blurted. "It is live evidence from officer-issued equipment," Elena Ruiz said before she could stop herself. Judge Bellini gave Elena a quick glance, not scolding, just steadying, then turned back to the defense table. "Ms. Mercer, do you wish to correct your earlier statements?" Cassandra's chin lifted. Arrogance was all she had left, so she wore it harder. "I wish to speak to my attorney." "You were very comfortable speaking without one a moment ago," Judge Bellini replied. That should have been the moment she learned restraint. It should have been the moment a decent lawyer put a hand on her arm and told her silence was the only remaining mercy. But the next revelation arrived before she could regroup. Theo Banks placed a second document on the clerk's desk. "Your Honor, there's more. After the citation was issued, Ms. Mercer made 2 phone calls from the scene. The first was to Captain Owen Mercer. The second was to Sergeant Nolan Pike of Vehicle Services. Sergeant Pike then contacted the tow desk and requested the original ticket be held pending review. Internal Affairs has been notified." The courtroom turned toward Cassandra with the same sick fascination people bring to the instant a building begins to crack. She had come in looking for special treatment. Now the record suggested she expected it as standard service. "Sergeant Pike is a family friend," Cassandra said. "That means nothing." "It means enough to preserve," Judge Bellini said. "This matter is no longer a routine citation." Then he said the sentence that made the whole room still. "Clerk, add potential witness interference and official misconduct referral to the record." If you believe the truth always gets louder right after someone tries to bury it, like this video right now. Because what happened next would expose not just one person's arrogance, but an entire system of quiet favors hiding behind polished smiles. At 8:44, the side door opened again, and EMT supervisor Rachel Donnelly entered with a sealed envelope from Rhode Island Hospital. Judge Bellini reviewed it silently, then looked up. "The victim, Mateo Rivas, is in imaging," he said. "Preliminary findings include clavicle fracture, orbital bruising, and loss of sensation in 2 fingers on the left hand." For the first time, something like fear crossed Cassandra's face. Not compassion, fear. She understood consequences when they finally bent toward her. Then another name rose from the gallery. "Your Honor." It was Denise Carter, the transport driver. Mid-50s, navy rain jacket, eyes red from the stress of the morning. She stood with both hands gripping the bench in front of her. "If the court allows," she said, voice shaking. "That little girl in my van, Emily Sutton, missed her check-in time because we were blocked. She has seizure complications. I had to explain to her mother why we were late while she was crying in the back seat." Judge Bellini nodded. "Ma'am, you may be called formally in the transferred matter. For now, thank you. Please be seated." But the damage was done. There was not one victim. There were layers now. Mateo on the pavement, Emily in the van, Theo Banks under pressure, a city worker asked to bend procedure. Every additional detail widened the moral crater beneath Cassandra's expensive heels. And still she would not stop. She rose without permission. "This is ridiculous. You are all turning an inconvenience into a circus because you want a headline. My family has done more for this city than anyone in this room." That sentence landed like gasoline near a match. Marisol Vega stood up before she could stop herself. "My son works 2 jobs for this city," she said. "He still waits 4 hours at the clinic." Marcus Shaw moved toward her gently, but Judge Bellini held up a hand. He understood what everyone was feeling. The insult had crossed from judicial disrespect into class contempt. Cassandra had not just threatened the bench. She had told every ordinary person present exactly what she thought of them. "The law is never more beautiful," Judge Bellini said quietly, "than when it protects the person with no title in the room." That was another quote people would replay. But in that moment, it was not meant for social media. It was meant for Tiana Brooks with her tuition worries, for Walter Briggs with his cane, for Denise Carter and little Emily Sutton, for Mateo Rivas under hospital lights. It was a reminder that the courtroom was not a showroom for status. It was supposed to be the last room in the city where truth got equal seating. Then Alina Ruiz received a note from the deputy clerk outside. She opened it, read one line, and went visibly still. Her eyes lifted to the judge. "Your Honor," she said, trying to keep her voice level, "there's a courier from Chambers Intake, marked urgent and personal." Marcus Shaw took the envelope, checked it, and handed it to the bench. No return address. Plain white paper. Judge Bellini opened it carefully. Inside was a single printed sheet. The atmosphere changed before he even spoke. His face did not harden. It cooled. "Ms. Mercer," he said, "do you know anything about a message delivered this morning containing my home address, my wife's name, and the school location of my granddaughter?" A woman near the back actually cried out. Alina Ruiz's hand went to her throat. Theo Banks took 2 steps forward on instinct. Cassandra froze, and for the first time all morning she looked less like a queen and more like a person who had lost sight of where the edge was. "That is insane," she whispered. "Is it false?" Judge Bellini asked. "I didn't send that." Marcus Shaw had already signaled for courthouse security. The atmosphere in Courtroom 3 was now electric with dread. A threat against a judge's family was not contempt. It was a different universe. And yet nobody in the room believed the timing was a coincidence. Not when Cassandra had just said people in her husband's world remembered who embarrassed them. Not when she had just implied life beyond the robe could get very difficult. Judge Bellini looked to Theo Banks. "Preserve that as evidence. Security review all entrances from 7:30 onward." Then, with the steadiness of a man who had spent decades not panicking in public, he looked back at Cassandra Mercer and said, "Ms. Mercer, if you are innocent of this, the truth will help you. If you are involved, today will be the first day of a very long fall." And down the hallway, at that exact moment, Captain Owen Mercer himself was walking toward the courtroom, unaware that by the time he opened those doors, his family name would already be coming apart. Owen Mercer was 46, broad-shouldered, clean-shaven, uniform immaculate, captain's bars polished bright enough to reflect the overhead lights. Men like him learned early how to control a room without ever seeming to try. But when he entered Courtroom 3 and saw the locked doors, the extra deputies, the hospital packet, the frozen look on his wife's face, and Judge Bellini still holding the anonymous note, even he knew this had gone far beyond damage control. "Owen," Cassandra said, relief flooding her voice, "tell them." He did not answer immediately. That hesitation mattered. It was small. Most people missed it. Judge Bellini did not. "Captain Mercer," the judge said, "your presence is noted. You are not counsel of record. You may sit in the gallery unless called." Owen stayed standing. "Your Honor, I'd like a brief word with my wife." "No." The word cracked like dry wood. No drama, no speech, just no. Cassandra turned, stunned. She was not used to hearing that word from men in authority. Usually they softened it, delayed it, negotiated it, not Bellini. "My wife is under stress," Owen said, voice tightening. Judge Bellini nodded once. "A young man is in a hospital because of this morning. A child's medical transport was obstructed. An officer alleges improper interference. And I have before me a possible threat involving my family. We are past the stage where stress outranks procedure. That was quote number 4, and it landed like a hammer. The gallery didn't move. Nobody wanted to miss a syllable. Owen finally looked at Cassandra, and what he saw in her face seemed to hit him harder than the evidence had. Not innocence, not even fear, expectation. She expected him to solve this, to turn rank into eraser, to wrap the city around her mistake the way he had done before, quietly, skillfully, invisibly. Because this was not the first time. Internal Affairs Lieutenant Samuel Price arrived at 9:03. He came in plain clothes, carrying a leather folder and the weary expression of a man who hated public messes but hated hidden rot even more. He requested a sidebar with the judge, which in a municipal courtroom meant a low-voiced conference at the bench with Alina Ruiz and the city attorney present. The side conversation lasted less than 3 minutes. When it ended, Bellini's mouth was set in a line that told everyone the next turn would be serious. "Captain Mercer," he said, "Lieutenant Price indicates there may be relevant prior incidents involving procedural contacts made on behalf of Ms. Mercer." Cassandra spun toward her husband. "What did you tell them?" Owen's jaw flexed. "Nothing yet." "Yet," she said. The room was beginning to understand the shape of the thing. Today was not isolated. It was a pattern with a fresh crack in the wall. A restaurant valet incident in 2024. A dismissed parking assault complaint at Water Place. A reported argument at Mercy Urgent Care where a nurse was allegedly told she'd lose her job. Nothing proven criminal. All of it buried under the fog of inconvenience, intimidation, and whispered calls. But when a pattern meets an injury, and then a threat, and then official interference, buried things rise. Lieutenant Price requested the court preserve all cell phones voluntarily present for forensic notice. Owen's face changed at that. He knew exactly how many private embarrassments lived inside modern devices. Cassandra knew too. Her fingers tightened around her phone. "Ms. Mercer," Bellini said, "you are ordered not to delete, alter, or destroy any digital communication related to this case." She laughed again, but the sound was thinner now. "You really think I'm scared of this?" Judge Bellini leaned back. "Fear is not required. Accountability will do." Then came the first crack inside the marriage everyone in the room could feel, but no one yet understood. Owen said, very quietly, "Cassie, did you send anything to his house?" She whipped toward him. "Of course not." "Did you ask someone to?" "No." "Did you mention his family to anyone?" She did not answer fast enough. That pause was worse than any denial. Owen looked down once, then at Lieutenant Price, and a whole private history med to pass across his face. Protection, fatigue, shame, love curdled into maintenance. He sat down slowly in the gallery, not beside his wife but one bench behind her. People noticed, everyone noticed. If you've made it this far, subscribe now, because the next revelation is where this story stops being about a spoiled threat and starts becoming a full collapse of the illusion that some families live above the same law they praise in public. At 9:17, Green's Cafe provided their storefront recording. Unlike the city traffic camera, this one had sound picked up from the awning mic used for weather alerts. The footage was sharper. The Range Rover's driver's side window was fully open. Mateo's scooter entered frame. The crash happened. Theo Banks ran in. Denise Carter shouted. And then, just seconds later, before the phone calls, before the citation, before the courtroom performance, Cassandra said something else. "You can bill the city. My husband runs half this block." There it was, not panic, not confusion, a worldview. Owen closed his eyes briefly. Lieutenant Price made a note. Alina Ruiz kept typing. Then the video showed Cassandra placing a call at 7:48 a.m. The audio was partial but enough. She said, "Owen, get Pike on this now. I am not sitting in court with civilians over a scratched scooter." Civilians. The word cut differently in that room, not because it was illegal, because it revealed contempt for everybody outside her immediate radius of power. Tiana Brooks whispered, "Did she really say civilians like that?" Walter Briggs shook his head. Marisol Vega looked at the floor and blinked back anger. Judge Bellini turned to Owen. "Captain Mercer, have you had any contact this morning with Sergeant Nolan Pike concerning your wife's citation?" Owen knew there were only bad answers. "Yes." "Did you ask him to intervene?" "I asked him to find out what happened." Lieutenant Price spoke carefully. "Captain, phone records indicate you told Sergeant Pike to freeze the paper trail until I get there." Owen inhaled once through his nose. "Yes." The room made that low human sound people make when the truth finally steps all the way into the light. Cassandra stared at him like he had just committed betrayal rather than merely failed to complete the usual rescue. "You said you were handling it." "I said I was coming," he answered. "That's not what you meant." Judge Bellini's gaze moved between them. Then he said something nobody in the room expected. "Captain Mercer, remain available. I may refer your conduct directly to Superior Court." Now the collapse was not theoretical, it was expanding. Career, reputation, marriage, public image. All the glittering scaffolding began to shake at once. Cassandra stood again, voice rising. "This is because you hate my husband. That's what this is. Petty, jealous people trying to take down a good man because his wife refused to be spoken to like trash." Marcus Shaw moved closer. Judge Bellini did not flinch. "Sit down, Ms. Mercer." "No." That word sat in the air like a lit wire. Bellini took off his glasses, folded them, and set them on the bench with almost ceremonial precision. A courtroom is the last room in a city where a title must sit down. Quote number 5, the strongest yet. Then, in open session, he held Cassandra Mercer in direct contempt for threatening the court and disrupting proceedings, ordered her remanded pending transfer hearing, and referred the underlying matter, the injury collision, the interference allegations, and the possible intimidation of a judicial officer to Providence County Superior Court. Marcus Shaw approached. Cassandra jerked her arm back. "You are not touching me." "Ma'am," Marcus said, "please comply." She pulled again harder and the Cartier watch flashed as she nearly lost balance in her own heels. It would have looked ridiculous if it weren't so ugly. Tiana Brooks looked away. Walter Briggs muttered, "Still won't stop." Owen half rose, then stopped himself. Lieutenant Price watched with a face of stone. "Cassandra Mercer," Judge Bellini said, "borrowed power has an expiration date. Yours just arrived." That line would lead every evening broadcast. As Marcus and a female deputy escorted her through the side door, she twisted around and shouted the sentence that guaranteed this case would ignite statewide before lunch. "This city will crawl back to us when this is over." Nobody answered. Nobody had to. Because after the footage, after the interference, after the note to the judge's family, nobody in that courtroom believed the city was crawling back to anyone. The city was finally standing up. By noon, clips from the hearing were on every local station. By 2:30, national commentary pages had reposted the body cam line. By dinner, "Volume is not evidence" was trending regionally. But behind the viral headlines, real people were still bleeding, waiting, worrying, and paying for the spectacle with actual consequences. Mateo Rivas called me out of imaging just after 1 o'clock. He was a first-generation college student taking online logistics classes at night, sending money home to his mother in Pawtucket, and delivering food 6 days a week on that scooter, because tuition would not wait for perfect circumstances. The fracture itself would heal. The nerve damage in his left hand was less certain. A surgeon told him they needed to monitor swelling before they knew whether fine motor function would fully return. For a delivery rider trying to save enough money to transfer into mechanical engineering, "We don't know yet," can sound like a cliff opening under your feet. Emily Sutton made her neurology slot late, but her mother, Cara Sutton, later wrote in a statement that the delay sent Emily into a panic episode so severe it took 3 nurses to calm her before evaluation. Denise Carter filed her incident memo that afternoon. Theo Banks filed 3: collision, noncompliance, and official interference contact. Lieutenant Price opened a preliminary corruption review. And in a holding room below the courthouse, Cassandra Mercer kept demanding a mirror and a better chair. Owen met with his union counsel at 3:10 p.m. in a windowless room that smelled like copier toner and stale coffee. The lawyer asked him the question that stripped away the performance. "Have you fixed things for her before?" Owen answered after a long silence, "I smoothed misunderstandings." The lawyer sighed. "That means yes." When people later asked when the captain's loyalty finally broke, some said it was in court. Some said it was when internal affairs got involved. The truth was uglier and more human. It broke in fragments over years, each one too embarrassing to name, until the morning his wife nearly turned a judge's family into leverage. That was the moment he realized protection had become participation. At 5:42 p.m., courthouse security traced the anonymous envelope to a private mailbox dropped 2 blocks away. The camera there showed a hooded figure wearing gloves and sunglasses, impossible to identify cleanly. But at 6:08 another detail surfaced. On Cassandra's phone extraction notice, one unsent draft message from 7:58 a.m. read, "Maybe His Honor should remember he has family too. Drafts matter. Thoughts not sent can still tell truth about intent." Cassandra claimed it was sarcasm. The prosecutor would later call it rehearsal. The next morning, June 15, 2025, Providence County Superior Court assigned the matter as State v. Mercer, docket SC 254419. Assistant Attorney General Lydia Chen took the lead. Lydia was 38, sharp-eyed, Yale Law, no wasted words, a woman whose reputation had been built not on theatrical speeches, but on the quiet terror she inspired in liars who mistook her composure for softness. She requested 3 things immediately: preservation of all digital evidence, no contact orders covering witnesses and court personnel, and a review of Captain Mercer's communications over the preceding 12 months. Cassandra made bail that afternoon under strict conditions. When she stepped out in the same clothes from the day before, reporters shouted questions over one another. "Did you threaten the judge? Did your husband intervene? Did you know the cyclist was hospitalized?" She paused only once, turned slightly toward the cameras and said, "This has been distorted by people with agendas." That clip played all night. If you think that line always makes things worse when the footage already exists, drop a comment telling us the exact second you would have told her to stop talking. Because she was still trying to win a battle that evidence had already ended. The Superior Court hearing began 9 days later, June 24 at 9:00 a.m. Courtroom 5 was larger, darker, and packed past standing room. Reporters lined the back wall. Law students took notes. Off-duty officers came in plain clothes. So did charity board members who once toasted Cassandra with champagne and now avoided eye contact in the hallway. This was no longer a city story. It had become a national morality play. What happens when someone tries to weaponize status in the one place status is supposed to fail? Cassandra arrived in a navy Roland Murrett dress and low heels instead of stilettos, coached at last by defense attorney Martin Hale, 61, silver tie, careful voice, expensive restraint. His first instruction had been simple: no eye rolls, no interruptions, no visible reactions. His second had been more difficult: do not look at the press. She violated both within 15 minutes. Judge Evelyn Soto presided over Superior Court. 58 years old, former prosecutor known for her precision and absolute intolerance for courtroom theatrics, she was not charming and she did not care to be. Where Bellini had a grandfatherly warmth, Soto had steel. When Cassandra entered, Soto looked over her glasses once and said, Ms. Mercer, understand something early. This room is larger, but your excuses will not be. That set the tone. Lydia Chen laid out the case in measured steps, reckless operation causing injury, leaving the scene context pending, witness intimidation, attempted obstruction of official process, criminal contempt, and unlawful contact connected to a judicial officer. She did not overplay. She let the facts do what they were already designed to do. Then she introduced the first witness, Mateo Rivas. Mateo walked carefully, left arm still supported small healing scar near his eyebrow, fingers stiff. He wore a charcoal Uniqlo jacket and cheap black sneakers, the kind of details that somehow made everything more devastating. He looked young, too young to be central evidence in a story about social power, too young to have had his future paused by somebody who called him a scratched scooter. Lydia asked him about that morning. He spoke plainly. He had picked up 2 breakfast orders from Green's Cafe. He saw the SUV reversing into the lane. He rang his scooter bell. He swerved because the transport van left little room. He hit the curb. He remembered rain, a cracking sound in his shoulder, then the taste of blood. "Did you hear the defendant after you fell?" Lydia asked. "Yes." "What did you hear?" Mateo swallowed. Courtrooms make some memories sharper. She said, "This is not my problem." Then she said I could build the city. The gallery shifted with a rustle of anger. Even people who had heard the clip before reacted differently when the injured person said it aloud. Martin Hale cross-examined gently, the only possible strategy. He suggested Mateo might not know exactly how close the SUV came to him. Mateo agreed he did not know the precise distance. Hale suggested rain and shock could distort memory. Mateo agreed shock is confusing. Then Hale asked if Cassandra had physically struck him. The prosecutor objected to form. Judge Soto allowed a narrowed answer. "The car didn't hit my body," Mateo said. "The car took away the space I needed not to crash." Simple, honest, hard to shake. Then Lydia introduced still photos of Mateo's injuries, medical scans, and a rehabilitation estimate. The left-hand nerve impairment might limit grip strength for months, maybe longer. His scooter was destroyed. His delivery income was gone. The room got very still when Lydia asked how he was paying rent. "My mother borrowed from her retirement account," he said. Cassandra looked down. Whether from shame or strategy, no one could tell yet. The second witness was Denise Carter. She described Emily Sutton's delayed transport, the child's distress, the congestion, the horn, the shouting. Then came Cara Sutton, Emily's mother, who was not on the original witness list but testified at the bond conditions review. She carried a folder filled with pediatric notes and spoke with the kind of exhausted dignity that makes audiences furious. "My daughter," Cara said, "doesn't understand rank. She understands fear. She saw adults yelling, she saw a man on the ground bleeding, and she thought she was in danger. She had nightmares for 4 nights. No law review article could have done what that sentence did in the room." And then came the twist that changed the emotional center of the case. Lydia called Walter Briggs. Walter was 70. A retired welder and Korean War-era Navy mechanic's son, not a dramatic man by nature. The day of the incident, he had been on the far sidewalk heading into court for a registration matter. When Theo Banks ran toward Mateo, Walter had stepped backward to make room, slipped in runoff at the curb near the cone Cassandra knocked loose, and fallen against a metal planter. He needed 8 stitches to the scalp. Because it happened in the chaos rather than direct impact, his injury had barely made the first reports. Now he lifted his cap to show the still pink line near his temple. "I'm fine compared to that boy," Walter said, nodding toward Mateo. "But if you're asking whether one person's selfishness can ripple, yes, it can." Layer by layer, the courtroom watched harm expand outward from a single moment of entitlement. One injured courier, one delayed child, one elderly man cut in the confusion, one officer pressured to ignore process. One judge threatened. What Cassandra had treated as a minor inconvenience had become a map of damage. Before the lunch recess, Lydia played the call log sequence between Cassandra, Owen, and Sergeant Pike. Then came the messages. Pike to tow desk, hold the Mercer paper. Tow desk to Pike, injury scene, cannot. Pike back, captain asking questions. Not a direct order to erase, but enough to imply pressure. Enough for internal affairs, enough for public disgust. In the hallway during recess, reporters chased comment from both sides. Martin Hale said only, "My client contests the criminal characterization." Lydia said, "The state's position is that no family name entitles anyone to immunity." Meanwhile, in a conference room upstairs, Owen Mercer sat under our subpoena review with his own attorney and Lieutenant Price. They had reached the terrible stage where every act of protection now looked indistinguishable from corruption. His phone contained years of half-favors. "Can you look into this? Smooth this over." She was upset. Not worth formalizing. Not always crimes, often worse in a subtler way. A culture of exceptions. If you believe systems usually break from 1,000 quiet favors before one public scandal exposes them, subscribe now. Because the witness who took the stand after lunch would prove this was never just about one bad morning. The prosecution's afternoon witness was Sergeant Nolan Pike. He looked wrecked before he even sat down. 49, thinning hair, union ring, the face of a man who had not slept since the subpoena arrived. He had worked vehicle services for 19 years and knew exactly how ugly it looked to have touched the Mercer ticket. Lydia asked him whether Captain Mercer instructed him to alter the citation. He said no, not explicitly. She asked whether he understood the captain wanted the matter delayed. Yes. She asked whether that request came through professional channels. No. She asked whether he would have acted the same if the driver had been a waitress named Carla Lopez instead of Cassandra Mercer. Pike hesitated. No. That one word landed like truth stripped bare. No legal jargon, no buffer, just no. He testified that this was not the first time he had fielded off-the-record inquiries related to Cassandra. A valet assault complaint at Water Place in 2024. A heated dispute over a booted vehicle near the marina. A call involving a volunteer at a charity auction. Nothing I considered criminal enough on its face, Pike said. But enough that when I saw her name that morning, I knew trouble was coming. Martin Hale tried to limit the prior contacts as irrelevant character evidence, but Judge Soto allowed a narrow pattern showing state of mind and expectation of intervention. Cassandra's face flushed so deeply it reached her ears. She leaned toward Hale and whispered furiously. He did not look at her. Then Lydia introduced the forensic extraction from Cassandra's phone. The courtroom learned about the unsent draft mentioning the judge's family. They learned about a contact saved as M-Box West tied to the mailbox store near the anonymous envelope drop. They learned she had searched at 8:01 a.m. Judge Bellini wife name and at 8:02 Bellini home district. Her lawyer argued panic, curiosity, online rumor checking. The state argued preoccupation with leverage. Judge Bellini himself was not present. He would testify later only if needed. But his absence did not soften the room. If anything, it made the evidence feel less theatrical and more grave. Then came a moment nobody expected. Lydia called Lily Mercer, 17 years old. A murmur ran through the gallery. Martin Hale objected immediately. Judge Soto asked for proffer. Lydia explained that Lily had personal knowledge relevant to Cassandra's statements and prior conduct, and that the state would keep questioning narrow. After a tense pause, Soto allowed it. Lily entered in a gray school blazer, hair tied back, face pale with the specific strain of a teenager walking into adult catastrophe. She did not look at her mother. She looked at the witness chair, then at Judge Soto, then down at her own hands. "Lily," Lydia said softly, "did you speak with your mother on the morning of June 14th? "Yes." "How?" "She called me at 8:05 while I was at school drop-off with a friend's mom." What did she say? Lily swallowed. She said, "They're trying to humiliate me over nothing. Your father will fix it." Did she say anything else about the judge? A long pause. Yes. What? She said, "These old men in robes always remember their fathers and grandfathers when somebody reminds them." The room chilled. It was not a direct admission about the envelope, but it linked the thought to the exact morning. It linked family to leverage. It linked arrogance to intention. Cassandra shook her head violently. "That is not what I said." Judge Soto's gaze snapped toward her. "One more interruption and I will revoke your release." Lily kept speaking, voice trembling now. "My mother says things when she's angry. Most people never hear them because someone cleans it up afterward." Those words cut Owen more visibly than they cut Cassandra. He lowered his head. Every enabling compromise he had ever called harmless now stood in the room with his daughter's voice wrapped around it. Lydia asked one final question. "Lily, why did you agree to testify?" Now everybody listened harder, because children in these stories usually protect their parents, even when they know better. What Lily said instead transformed the case from scandal into tragedy. "Because," she whispered, tears finally spilling, "I'm tired of watching people act like fear is the same thing as respect. There are moments when a courtroom stops being architecture and becomes mirror. That was one of them." After Lily stepped down, Judge Soto called for a brief recess. Cassandra remained seated, frozen, while everyone else stood. She looked at her daughter crossing back through the side aisle and said, low and sharp, "You did this to us." Lily stopped without turning around. Her answer was not loud. It did not need to be. "No, Mom, we did this to other people. They're just finally saying it out loud." That line would go viral by sunset. The next morning, the city expected Captain Owen Mercer to invoke privilege where possible, minimize where necessary, and hold the family line. That expectation lasted until 10:14 a.m., when he raised his right hand, took the oath, and chose the sentence that detonated the rest of his career. "I cannot honestly say my wife's conduct surprised me." Gasps, pens scribbling, reporters leaning forward, Cassandra staring like the floor had disappeared. Owen testified in uniform because Judge Soto had denied his request to appear in civilian clothes. "The rank is relevant," she said. She was right. He admitted contacting Sergeant Pike. He admitted using informal channels in the past. He admitted that he had, quote, "blurred the difference between helping a spouse and pressuring a system." But then he went farther. He described a private conversation from 6 months earlier after a minor fundraiser dispute, when he told Cassandra she needed to stop using his position as threat currency. "What did she say?" Lydia asked. "That people only respect consequences." Did she distinguish between lawful consequences and personal retaliation? No. And on June 14th, when she called from the scene, she told me I needed to shut it down before she ended up in a room with nobodies. No one breathed for a second. Owen also disclosed something new. 3 weeks earlier, after another social incident he considered escalating, he had begun quietly archiving certain communications because, in his words, "I was afraid that if there was ever a serious event, no one would believe how fast routine pressure had become moral panic." Lydia asked if that included voicemails. It did. Judge Soto allowed one recording over strenuous defense objection. The file date was June 14 at 8:26 a.m., while Cassandra sat waiting in municipal court before the hearing truly erupted. She had called Owen and left a message when he did not answer. The audio played through the courtroom speakers. "Owen, pick up. If Bellini thinks he's going to grandstand, remind him he goes home like everybody else. I am not being embarrassed by some courthouse celebrity. Fix it before I do." No direct threat, but now the family language, the home reference, the target, the timing, and the envelope all tightened around one another like wire. Martin Hale tried to repair the damage on cross. He suggested Owen was shading testimony to save his own position. Owen answered with a weariness more persuasive than anger. "Nothing I say saves my position." That was true. Everyone could hear it. His career was already bleeding out in public, but truth sometimes gets cleaner when it no longer has anything left to protect. Cassandra exploded before the cross-examination ended. "You're lying because you hate what this has done to you." Judge Soto banged the gavel once. "Ms. Mercer, you let them turn me into a monster because you care more about your uniform than your family." That outburst did what no prosecutor could have done better. It stripped away defense coaching and revealed raw blame, not remorse, not accountability, injury at being abandoned by the machinery she thought existed for her comfort. Owen turned toward her fully for the first time. His voice was low, almost gentle, and because of that it hurt more. "No, Cassie, I cared more about my uniform than the truth for too long. That's why we're here." Even Judge Soto paused a fraction at that. It was not theatrical, it was confession. If you've ever seen the exact moment denial starts losing oxygen, hit like right now, because the next piece of evidence is where the entire courtroom realized Cassandra Mercer was no longer fighting the state. She was fighting reality itself. Lydia Chen's next witness was a digital analyst who mapped the anonymous envelope route. The mailbox drop camera was unclear, but one thing it captured was the vehicle parked half a block away. A black Range Rover autobiography with distinctive chrome trim damage on the rear left panel, matching damage photographed at the collision scene after contact with the cone base. Defense argued common model. The analyst then overlaid toll pings and parking telemetry from Cassandra's connected car app, obtained by warrant. The location put her vehicle within 150 feet of the mailbox store at 8:19 a.m. The courtroom murmured again. Martin Hale rubbed his temple. Cassandra stared at the exhibit screen as if numbers themselves had become "Me traitors." Then came the final blow of the evidentiary phase, a partial fingerprint on the inside fold of the printed sheet. Not enough alone for certainty, but consistent with Cassandra's right index. Combined with search history, vehicle location, draft message, voicemail language, and open court statements, the state argued consciousness of guilt and intimidation by indirect means. Judge Soto did not rule on ultimate guilt that day. This was still a layered proceeding, but everyone in that room knew the tide had shifted decisively. What no one expected was what happened outside Courtroom 5 during the afternoon break. Mateo Rivas, still sore, still financially wrecked, still the person most obviously entitled to rage, asked to speak privately with Lydia Chen. 10 minutes later, word spread among attorneys that he did not want the harshest possible sentence if Cassandra were convicted. He wanted restitution. He wanted accountability. He wanted truth. But he did not want a punishment that would let her imagine herself a martyr. When reporters learned that, they nearly ran over each other. Why would he show mercy? The answer came the next day during victim impact discussion. "I want her to understand damage," Mateo said. "Prison might scare her. It might even satisfy people. But if she never has to look directly at the kind of lives she treated as disposable, then she'll still leave thinking this happened to her instead of because of her." That sentence altered the moral temperature of the room. Outrage had driven the case. Now wisdom entered it from the least powerful person harmed. Kara Sutton said something similar, though in a different register. "My daughter doesn't need revenge," she told the court. "She needs a world where adults with status don't get to terrorize everybody else." Walter Briggs said, "Punishment ought to teach if it can. If it can't, then protect the public. But don't confuse humiliation with justice." And then, to the astonishment of nearly everyone, Judge Bellini submitted a letter. It was read into the record by the clerk because Bellini refused to appear in a way that could transform the matter into personality theater. The letter was one page, cream stationery, handwritten in blue ink. "I have served long enough," it began, "to know that threats against a judge are not always born from criminal sophistication. Sometimes they are born from the corruption of everyday entitlement, which can be equally dangerous because it mistakes humanity for leverage. If the defendant is convicted, I ask this court to consider a sentence that joins accountability to direct service, so that the lesson reaches deeper than fear." The room was stunned. This was the forgiveness twist nobody saw coming, not because Bellini was excusing her. He absolutely was not. He was asking for something harder than symbolic punishment. He was asking for transformation under supervision. Lydia Chen used the letter carefully. She did not sentimentalize it. "The state does not oppose a sentence that includes structured restorative components," she said, "provided the conviction and public protection are real." Judge Soto nodded, but gave nothing away. Then came the emotional breaking point. Martin Hale, seeing the wave turn against total denial, asked for a recess and spent 46 minutes in a consultation room with Cassandra Mercer. Whatever happened in that room changed her face when she emerged. The sharp defiance was still there, but it was cracked now. Eyes swollen, mascara touched up in haste, hands shaking despite the effort to hide it. When proceedings resumed, Hale announced that his client wished to make a limited allocution before further disposition. Courtrooms hate surprises. This one held its breath. Cassandra stood. For the first time in the case, she looked not at the judge, not at the prosecutor, not at the cameras, but at Matteo. "I keep wanting to say," she began, voice unsteady, "that this got bigger than it should have, that I didn't mean for any of this, that I was under stress, that people misunderstood my tone." She stopped, swallowed, started again. "But every time I say that in my head, I hear how selfish it sounds." Nobody moved. "I did not think of you as a person in that moment," she said to Matteo. "I thought of you as a complication in my mourning. I thought of the officer as an annoyance. I thought of the transport van as something in my way. I thought of the court as a place my husband could solve for me. And I thought of the judge as a problem to pressure." There it was, the first clean truth. She turned toward the bench, then to Kara Sutton, then to Walter Briggs. "I may not have planned every consequence that followed, but I fed them, with my words, with my assumptions, with the way I've lived. And I don't know how to stand here and call myself good after hearing all of this out loud." People expected anger. They got trembling honesty instead. Then came the line that marked her real moment of realization. "I spent years thinking power meant never hearing the word no. Now I hear every no I forced on other people." Tiana Brooks began crying quietly in the gallery. Even Lydia Chen let the silence sit rather than rush to fill it. But redemption in stories like this cannot arrive cheap. It needs cost, it needs consequence, it needs proof. Judge Soto ordered a full presentence investigation, a forensic financial review for restitution capability, and an ethics impact report. Disposition was set 3 weeks later. During those weeks, the city held its breath and speculated. Would she get prison time? Would her husband be charged? Would the judge's mercy letter make her escape? Would wealth soften the landing again? Then the next twist arrived. On July 11, Internal Affairs concluded that Captain Owen Mercer would face departmental termination proceedings for misuse of position and failure to report improper interference attempts. Before that hearing could proceed, Owen resigned, quietly. No ceremony, no pension celebration, just a statement through counsel. "I accept responsibility for conduct that compromised public confidence." In a city built on badge culture, that sentence hit like thunder. At the same time, Financial Review revealed something the public had not known. The Mercers were far more leveraged than they appeared. The Range Rover was leased through a business entity. The Harborview condo carried a second line of credit. Charity Prestige had masked private strain. The glamour wasn't fake exactly. It was financed. Fragile. Performance. That mattered because it complicated easy hatred. Cassandra had not just been drunk on influence. She had been terrified of losing the image that influence maintained. It did not excuse her. It explained the desperation. Moral complexity entered the case again, sharper now. The worst behavior sometimes grows where ego and fear have been feeding each other for years. If you're still watching, comment with one word: accountability. Because the sentence handed down on July 14th was unlike anything that court had imposed in a case like this, and the reason it happened that way changed more than Cassandra Mercer's future. On July 14, exactly 1 month after the collision, Courtroom 5 overflowed again. Judge Soto began by finding sufficient factual basis across the charges and entering judgment on the counts supported by the allocution, the evidence, and negotiated plea adjustment under state supervision. Cassandra Mercer pleaded guilty to reckless endangerment causing bodily injury, attempted witness intimidation, criminal contempt, and improper interference with official process. The envelope-related intimidation component was resolved as part of the plea framework with aggravating facts preserved for sentencing. In plain English, she was not escaping the worst of what the state could prove. She was accepting a conviction with teeth. Then Soto delivered a sentencing statement, so precise people later printed it in full. "You are not before this court because you were affluent," she said. "You are before this court because you believed affluence, marriage, and social proximity to authority could substitute for character. They cannot. The law does not grow weaker in the presence of a powerful name. If it does, it stops being law." She imposed 18 months incarceration, suspended after 90 days served, with 5 years supervised probation. The courtroom reacted instantly. Cassandra gripped the table edge. Her lawyer's face tightened, but Soto kept reading. She ordered full restitution to Mateo Rivas for medical expenses, lost income, and educational interruption, plus a victim support fund contribution benefiting pediatric transport trauma care at Rhode Island Hospital in Emily Sutton's name. She ordered 2,000 hours of community service, not symbolic litter pickup, but supervised service split between trauma rehabilitation support logistics, municipal court access assistance for unrepresented defendants, and weekly volunteer labor at a mobility equipment nonprofit that repaired chairs, braces, and transport devices for low-income families. Then came the historic part. For the first 18 months of probation, Soto said, the defendant will report twice monthly not merely to a probation officer, but to a restorative accountability panel composed of court personnel, community medical staff, and at least one citizen advocate unrelated to her social network. She will attend public court sessions in the general gallery, seated without privilege, for not less than 4 hours each week, so she can observe the ordinary people she once treated as beneath notice. She will complete a written reflection after each session. Any failure to comply will activate the suspended term. The gallery buzzed. Reporters practically vibrated. It was part sentence, part civic disassembly of entitlement. Soto was not done. The defendant is additionally